3 months after the War Council, Commander Zethkar stood in his private quarters aboard the orbital station above Kither Prime, staring at intelligence reports that made his worst fears seem optimistic. The restricted analysis he had prepared for the High Admiral had been expanded into a comprehensive study, and the results were terrifying. Human expansion hadn't stopped after Haven. If anything, it had accelerated. In the time since his encounter at their colony world, humans had established 17 new settlements across previously unclaimed systems. But these weren't traditional colonies. Each new world followed the same pattern that had been demonstrated at Haven: complete militarization disguised as civilian infrastructure. The door chime interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, knowing who it would be. Lieutenant Commander Yexal stepped into the room, carrying another datapad filled with reconnaissance information. The young officer had been assigned to Zethkar's intelligence division after the Haven incident, and his enthusiasm for understanding human behavior had become both valuable and disturbing. "Sir, we've received the latest reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The humans have made contact with the Zalari Confederation." Zethkar felt his mandibles click involuntarily. The Zalari were one of the few species in the region that had successfully resisted Kitherian expansion for decades. Their defensive technologies and strategic positioning had made conquest too costly to attempt. If humans were making contact with them, "What kind of contact?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Trade negotiations, sir?" "The humans are offering technological exchanges." Yexal activated his datapad, projecting holographic displays into the room. "But our intelligence suggests it's more than simple commerce." The projection showed shipping manifests and communication intercepts. Zethkar studied them carefully, his experienced eye picking out patterns that confirmed his growing suspicions. "They're sharing defensive technologies," he realized. "The humans are teaching the Zalari how to build kinetic weapons." "Yes, sir. And not just the Zalari. We've detected similar communications with the Moravian Union and the Independent Worlds Alliance. The humans appear to be systematically approaching every species in the region that has maintained independence from major empires." Zethkar stood and walked to his viewport, looking out at the stars that had once represented unlimited conquest for his people. Now each point of light seemed like a potential threat. "They're building a coalition," he said quietly. "Not through conquest or intimidation, but through shared defense." "Sir, there's more. Our analysis of their technological transfers suggests they're not just sharing weapons technology. They're teaching these species how to think like humans." The words sent a chill through Zethkar's spine. "Explain." Yexal activated another display, showing tactical analyses from various species that had recently made contact with humans. "Look at these defensive preparations. The Zalari used to rely on energy shields and electronic warfare. Now they're converting asteroids into kinetic platforms. The Moravians are abandoning their traditional fleet formations in favor of dispersed, hidden installations. They're all adopting human strategies." "Exactly, sir. But it's more than copying tactics. The humans seem to be teaching them to approach warfare from a completely different perspective. Instead of trying to win battles, they're learning to make battles unwinnable for the aggressor." Zethkar returned to his desk, studying the intelligence reports more carefully. The implications were staggering. The human approach to warfare wasn't just effective. It was contagious. Any species that learned their methods would become exponentially more difficult to conquer. How is the High Admiral responding to these developments? Yexal hesitated, and Zethkar noticed the young officer's discomfort. "Sir, there is disagreement within the War Council. Some members believe we should strike before this coalition can fully form. Others are calling for diplomatic contact with the humans." "And the High Admiral?" "He has ordered me to ask for your assessment, sir. Your encounter at Haven makes you our foremost expert on human capabilities." Zethkar almost laughed at the irony. 3 months ago, he had been a respected fleet commander. Now he was considered an expert because he had been the first Kitherian to retreat without firing a shot. His expertise was in recognizing when they were completely outmatched. My assessment remains unchanged, he said finally. Direct confrontation with humans would result in the destruction of any force we deploy against them. But this new development makes the situation far more complex. How so, sir? Originally, we could have simply avoided human space and continued expansion elsewhere. But if they're creating a defensive alliance with other species, that option may no longer exist. Eventually, we would encounter their allies and through them face human technology and tactics. Yexal activated another projection, this one showing star charts with marked territorial boundaries. The human sphere of influence was growing rapidly. Not through conquest, but through alliance. Sir, our strategic planners estimate that within 5 years, human defensive technology could be present in 30% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The Catherian Empire's expansion had been built on the assumption that they could choose when and where to fight. They had always been able to retreat, regroup, and attack weaker targets when faced with significant resistance. But humans weren't creating strong targets. They were making every target strong. There's something else, sir, Yexal said hesitantly. Something that wasn't included in the official intelligence reports? Zethkar looked up sharply. Continue. Our deep space reconnaissance has detected human vessels in uninhabited systems along our border. They're not establishing colonies or mining operations. They appear to be conducting what our analysts call preparation activities. What kind of preparations? The same kind we observed at Haven, sir. They're seeding empty systems with defensive installations, creating supply depots and staging areas. It's as if they're preparing for something that hasn't happened yet. The realization struck Zethkar with terrifying clarity. They're preparing for war with us. That was our assessment, sir, but not defensive preparation. They appear to be preparing for offensive operations. The room seemed to grow colder around Zethkar. He had witnessed human defensive capabilities at Haven, had seen how they could turn a single world into an impregnable fortress. But the idea of humans taking the offensive was something he had never considered. Show me the reconnaissance data. The holographic display shifted to show tactical maps of border systems. Red markers indicated confirmed human activity, while yellow markers showed suspected installations. There were hundreds of them, spread across dozens of star systems in a pattern that surrounded Catherian space like a slowly closing net. How long have they been doing this? Zethkar asked quietly. Our best estimate is that they began these operations within days of your encounter at Haven, sir. They've been working continuously for 3 months. 3 months. In 3 months, humans had militarized border systems that the Catherian Empire had considered strategically irrelevant. While the War Council had been debating what to do about the human threat, humans had been quietly surrounding them. Sir, Yexal continued, there's one more thing. We intercepted a communication from the human vessel that contacted you at Haven, Captain Chun. Zethkar's attention snapped back to the present. What did she say? The transmission was directed at Catherian listening posts along the border. She asked to speak with you personally. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Captain Chun wanted to talk to him. The human who had effortlessly outmaneuvered an entire fleet wanted a conversation. Zethkar could think of only one reason why she would request such a meeting. She wants to deliver terms, he said. Sir? Terms of surrender. The humans have spent 3 months preparing for war, and now they want to offer us a chance to avoid it. Zethkar stood and walked to his communication console. Connect me to the High Admiral immediately. While Yexal established the connection, Zethkar stared out at the stars again. In his 4 centuries of life, he had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species choose between submission and extinction. Now, for the first time, he was seeing an empire face a choice between retreat and annihilation. The communication link activated, and High Admiral Vexel's scarred face appeared on the screen. Commander, report. Sir, the humans have requested direct communication with me. I believe they are prepared to offer terms. Terms for what? For our peaceful withdrawal from this region of space, sir. The reconnaissance data suggests they have been preparing for offensive operations against us. This communication may be their final attempt at a diplomatic solution. Vexthel was quiet for long moments, his four eyes studying Zethkar intently. Your recommendation? Take the meeting, sir. Whatever they're prepared to offer is likely more favorable than what they're prepared to take by force. And if their terms are unacceptable? Zethkar felt a weight settle in his chest that had nothing to do with gravity. Then we discover what humans consider an acceptable level of casualties in pursuit of their objectives. The High Admiral's expression grew grim. Very well. You are authorized to conduct preliminary nego. Commander Zethkar had seen 1,000 worlds burn. His crimson eyes had witnessed the fall of the Altarian Empire, the glassing of Nexus Prime, and the complete extinction of 17 different species across the galaxy. In his 4 centuries of life, he had commanded fleets that could crack planets and armies that moved like death itself across star systems. But today, standing on the bridge of his flagship, Dread Sovereign, something felt different. Something that made the battle-scarred veteran's forearms tremble slightly as he gripped the command rail. Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the human vessel, reported his communications officer. A thin Valkyrie with nervous twitches in his antenna, Zethkar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The humans had been broadcasting the same message for 3 standard hours now. 3 hours of what they called negotiations. The very concept amused him. In all his campaigns, Zethkar had never once negotiated with prey. Display it again, he rumbled. His voice like grinding stone, the main screen flickered to life, showing a small human female in what appeared to be a simple military uniform. No ceremonial armor, no intimidating displays of strength. She looked fragile, almost delicate by galactic standards. Her skin was pale, her hair brown, and she appeared to be barely out of adolescence by human standards. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the UES Defiance. I'm transmitting on all frequencies to the Catherian battle fleet. You have entered human space without authorization and are approaching our colony world of Haven. We strongly advise you to alter your course immediately. This is your final warning. The bridge erupted in laughter. Zethkar's own officers, hardened warriors who had crushed civilizations, were practically howling at the audacity. A single human vessel, no larger than one of their escort frigates, was threatening a fleet of 200 warships. Final warning, wheezed his tactical officer between laughs. Sir, shall I calculate how many seconds it would take to vaporize their ship? Zethkar was about to give the order when something in the human female's eyes stopped him. He had seen fear countless times before, had watched entire species prostrate themselves before his might, begging for mercy that never came. But this human showed no fear. Instead, there was something else. Something that reminded him of the look predators gave each other when they met unexpectedly in the wild. Sir? His tactical officer prompted. Run a full scan of their vessel, Zethkar ordered instead. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The scan results appeared on his personal display, and Zethkar frowned. The human ship was indeed small, but its power signature was strange. Their technology was primitive by Catherian standards, yet something about the readings didn't add up. The ship's mass distribution was wrong somehow. Sir, the scan is showing some anomalous readings, reported his science officer. Their vessel appears to be mostly empty space internally, but there are dense concentrations of matter in specific locations. Define dense, Zethkar said, leaning forward. Approaching neutronium density in some areas, sir. But that's impossible with their technology level. Before Zethkar could respond, the human captain was speaking again. Commander of the Catherian fleet, I can see you're scanning our ship. Good. I want you to understand what you're looking at. What you're detecting isn't advanced technology. It's simple physics. The transmission continued, and Zethkar noticed that the human's tone had shifted slightly. Still calm, but now there was an edge to it. You see, humans learned long ago that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. When we first met hostile aliens, we tried complex weapons, energy shields, all sorts of sophisticated defenses. But then we discovered something wonderful about space combat. Zethkar's tactical display began highlighting specific areas of the human vessel. The dense concentrations his science officer had mentioned were becoming clearer. Mass, the human captain said simply. Beautiful, simple mass. Do you know what happens when you accelerate a few thousand tons of tungsten carbide to a significant percentage of light speed? Your sensors should be telling you right about now. The science officer's voice cracked as he read his instruments. Sir, they're not carrying traditional weapons. The dense masses are projectile systems, kinetic impactors. But the acceleration capability they're showing suggests they can achieve velocities of approximately 15% of light speed. Zethkar felt something cold crawl up his spine. He had faced plasma cannons that could boil continents. He had stared down antimatter torpedoes and gravitic disruptors. But kinetic weapons at those velocities were something else entirely. They couldn't be stopped by shields. They couldn't be deflected by electromagnetic barriers. They were just mass and velocity, and when they hit, they delivered energy that could crack moons. Of course, the human continued, we could negotiate. You could turn around, leave human space, and we could all pretend this never happened. Your ships are impressive, Commander. One count 200 vessels, including several dreadnoughts. Normally, that would be quite overwhelming. The tactical officer was frantically running calculations now. Sir, if they can truly achieve those velocities, each projectile would hit with approximately 400 megatons of force. And our scans show they have dozens of launch tubes. But here's the thing about humans, Captain Chun continued. We're not normal. We don't do things the normal way. While other species were perfecting energy weapons and defensive systems, we were asking ourselves a different question. Not, how do we make a bigger gun? But, how do we make sure that when we fire, absolutely nothing can survive what comes next? Zethkar's mandibles were clicking rapidly now, a nervous habit from his youth that he thought he had conquered centuries ago. He had commanded the siege of Vorthen 7, where his fleet had reduced a planet of 12 billion inhabitants to molten slag. He had personally led the assault that broke the legendary Sentinel fleet at the Battle of the Iron Nebula. But something about this small human ship was making him feel an emotion he had almost forgotten. Uncertainty. Sir, incoming transmission from the colony, his communications officer reported. They're saying the planet's surface is... Sir, you need to see this. The tactical display switched to a view of Haven, the human colony world his fleet had come to claim. What he saw made his four hearts skip a beat. The planet's surface was covered in what looked like launch installations. Thousands of them. The entire world appeared to be one massive kinetic weapons platform. Captain Chun's voice came through again, and this time Zethkar could hear something new in her tone. Not anger, not hatred, but something far more disturbing. Professional interest. You've noticed our ground installations, she said. We've been watching your fleet approach for 3 days. Long enough to calculate trajectories, target solutions, and prepare our response. Haven isn't just a colony world, Commander. It's a demonstration. The science officer's voice was barely a whisper now. Sir, if the ground installations have the same capability as their ship, and there are thousands of them, the mathematics are quite simple, the human captain interrupted, as if she had heard their conversation. You have 200 ships. We have calculated that we can deliver approximately 50,000 kinetic impactors in the first wave, each carrying enough force to crack your largest dreadnought in half. The second wave would follow 30 seconds later. Then a third. We can maintain this rate of fire for approximately 6 hours. Zethkar stood frozen. In his centuries of warfare, he had never encountered anything like this. Other species fought with honor, with complex strategies, with sophisticated weapons that announced their power. But humans had apparently decided to weaponize physics itself. This is what humans do, Captain Chun continued. We take the simple solution and make it absolute. Other species ask, how do we win this battle? We ask, how do we make sure there's no possibility of losing? Other species build shields. We build weapons that make shields irrelevant. The tactical officer was running silent calculations, and Zethkar could see the color draining from his pale features. "Sir, even if we destroyed their ship and commenced orbital bombardment, we would lose approximately 60% of our fleet in the first exchange. And that's assuming their ground installations are their only defensive measure." "Oh, they're not," the human said cheerfully. "We've also sighted the approach vectors with kinetic mines. Simple devices, really. Just waiting for the right moment to accelerate. And our deep space monitoring stations have been tracking your fleet since you entered the system. They're currently painting targets for our mobile platforms." Zethkar's tactical display lit up with new contacts. Ships that hadn't been there moments before were suddenly visible, emerging from what appeared to be empty space. Dozens of them, all broadcasting the same impossible power signatures as the single vessel that had been talking to them. "Stealth technology?" his science officer whispered. "No," Zethkar said quietly. "They were hiding in the asteroid belt, using the natural interference to mask their approach." He had to admit it was elegantly simple. While his fleet had been focused on the single ship and the planet, the humans had been maneuvering their real forces into position. Captain Chion's final transmission was delivered in the same calm, professional tone she had maintained throughout the encounter. The journey back to Kither Prime took 14 standard days, but for Commander Zethkar, it felt like 14 lifetimes. Each night cycle, he found himself staring out at the stars, replaying the encounter at Haven over and over in his mind. His officers whispered among themselves, their confidence shaken by what they had witnessed. The mighty Catherian fleet, scourge of a dozen systems, had retreated from a single human colony without firing a shot, but Zethkar knew something his crew didn't understand yet. They hadn't retreated from a colony. They had escaped from a trap so perfectly engineered that even now, safe in hyperspace, he wondered if the humans had allowed them to leave, or simply hadn't bothered to stop them when they finally arrived at the Catherian homeworld. Zethkar was summoned immediately to the War Council. The great amphitheater where the Empire's military decisions were made stretched before him like a monument to conquest. Banners from 100 defeated civilizations hung from the walls, and the seats were filled with the greatest warriors in Catherian history. At the center sat High Admiral Vexthal, an ancient Catherian whose scars told the story of 3 centuries of warfare, his 4 eyes fixed on Zethkar with undisguised disappointment. "Commander," Vexthal's voice boomed across the chamber, "explain to this council why you returned from what should have been a routine conquest with your entire fleet intact but your mission incomplete." Zethkar stood at attention in the center of the amphitheater, feeling the weight of hundreds of judgmental gazes. He had practiced this moment during the journey home, but now that he was here, the words seemed inadequate. "High Admiral, we encountered unexpected resistance. The humans had prepared defensive measures that exceeded our tactical projections." A wave of laughter rippled through the assembled officers. General Mordek, a warrior known for his brutal efficiency, stood from his seat. "Unexpected resistance? From humans?" "Commander, we have studied these creatures. They have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. Their technology is primitive, their numbers limited. What possible resistance could they have offered to 200 of our finest vessels?" Zethkar felt his mandibles click involuntarily. How could he explain what he had seen? How could he make these seasoned warriors understand that humans didn't think like other species? "General, they had weaponized kinetic energy on a scale we had not anticipated. Their defensive installations were capable of delivering projectile attacks with approximately 400 megatons of force per impact." The laughter died away, replaced by murmurs of interest. Admiral Kexter leaned forward. "Kinetic weapons? How quaint. Did they think to pierce our ablative armor with metal slugs?" "Not pierce it, sir. Vaporize it, along with everything behind it. Their projectiles achieve velocities of 15% light speed." The amphitheater fell silent. Even the most bloodthirsty of the assembled warriors understood the physics involved. At those velocities, armor became irrelevant. Shields became meaningless. Mass and energy combined into something that could not be stopped, only avoided. High Admiral Vexel's eyes narrowed. You're certain of these measurements? Completely, sir. Our science officer confirmed the readings multiple times. But the velocity was not the only concern. Zethkar activated his portable display, projecting tactical information into the center of the amphitheater. They had transformed their entire colony world into a weapons platform. Thousands of launch installations, all capable of sustained fire. The tactical projection showed Haven as his sensors had recorded it. The assembled officers stared at the image of a world that had been turned into a fortress. Furthermore, Zethkar continued, they had positioned additional ships throughout the system, using natural interference to mask their signatures. When they revealed themselves, we were surrounded by forces that could deliver coordinated strikes from multiple vectors simultaneously. General Mordek was studying the display intently. Their numbers? Approximately 60 vessels detected, sir. But given their stealth capabilities, the actual number could have been significantly higher. 60 ships against 200, Admiral Kexter mused. Hardly overwhelming odds. Zethkar felt his frustration growing. They weren't understanding. They were thinking like Catherians, like warriors who believed in honorable combat and superior firepower. They weren't grasping the fundamental difference in how humans approached warfare. Respectfully, Admiral, it was not about the odds. It was about the capability. Each of their ships could deliver kinetic strikes that would completely destroy our largest dreadnoughts. They weren't trying to fight us. They were prepared to erase us. High Admiral Vexville stood slowly, his ancient joints creaking audibly in the silence. Commander Zethkar, you are describing a defensive capability that would require massive industrial infrastructure and decades of preparation. Are you suggesting that humans have been planning for our arrival specifically? No, sir. I believe they have been planning for any arrival. Zethkar paused, knowing that his next words would sound impossible. Based on their captain's statements, I believe they have fortified every human world in this manner. The eruption of voices was immediate. Officers shouted questions and objections, their disciplined formation dissolving into chaos. The idea that a young species could have militarized their entire civilization was beyond their understanding. Silence. Vexthel's command cut through the noise like a blade. The amphitheater quieted instantly. Commander, you will explain this assessment. Zethkar took a deep breath. The human captain indicated that Haven was not unique, but rather a demonstration. She specifically stated that humans had spent 50 years turning their worlds into fortresses. When I questioned the scale of their response, she corrected my assumption. They were not prepared to destroy our fleet to defend their colony. They were prepared to destroy our fleet to send a message. What message? General Mordek asked quietly, that humans are not prey. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the amphitheater, veteran warriors who had conquered civilizations exchanged uncertain glances. The concept of a prey species that refused to be prey was alien to their understanding of galactic order. Admiral Kexter was the first to speak. Perhaps we underestimated their defensive preparations for this particular world. That does not mean they have replicated such measures across their entire territory. With respect, Admiral, I believe they have done exactly that. Zethkar activated another display, showing the recorded transmission from Captain Chun. Observe their captain's demeanor throughout the encounter. The projection showed the human female again, calm and professional even when facing overwhelming odds. The assembled officers watched in silence as she delivered her warnings and explanations. Note her confidence, Zethkar pointed out. This is not bravado or desperation. She speaks with the certainty of someone who knows the outcome before the engagement begins. When she describes their capabilities, she does so with technical precision, not emotional appeal. General Mordek was studying the human captain intently. She shows no fear. None, Zethkar confirmed. But more importantly, she shows no surprise. She expected us. Not specifically our fleet, but some fleet. Her people were prepared for this encounter in a way that suggests they have been prepared for countless such encounters. High Admiral Vexthal was silent for long moments, his ancient mind processing what he was hearing. Finally he spoke. "Commander, what is your assessment of human strategic thinking?" Zethkar had dreaded this question, but he knew he had to answer honestly. "They do not think like warriors, sir. Warriors seek to win battles. Humans seek to make battles impossible to lose. They have apparently decided that the best defense is the complete elimination of any threat. And they have built their entire civilization around that principle. You believe they could resist a full Imperial assault?" "Sir, I believe they could destroy a full Imperial assault. Their weapons cannot be countered by existing technology. They have converted basic physics into an absolute weapon. Mass and velocity cannot be negotiated with or deflected. When they fire, whatever they target ceases to exist." The amphitheater was quiet except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. The greatest military minds in the Catherian Empire were contemplating the impossible, a species they could not conquer. Admiral Kexter broke the silence. "What do you recommend, Commander?" Zethkar had spent the entire journey home preparing for this moment, but speaking the words was still difficult. "I recommend we avoid human space entirely, sir. We classify them as a restricted zone and focus our expansion efforts in other directions." "You recommend we surrender territory to these humans without a fight?" "I recommend we survive, sir. Because if we fight them, we won't." General Morduk stood again, his scarred face twisted with frustration. "This is madness. You're asking us to fear a species that has barely left their home system." "General," Zethkar replied carefully, "they have left their home system. But they brought their home system with them. Every world they control has been turned into a fortress that makes traditional conquest impossible. They haven't expanded like other species, claiming territory and hoping to defend it. They have expanded by making each new world into a weapon pointed at anyone who approaches." High Admiral Vexthal raised one of his four hands,